Okay, we're going to continue our discussion on expansion panels by using the documentation for Angular Material version 10. And so let's take a look at another example of the expansion panel. And what we're going to do is take a look at this last example here. Now notice it's an expansion panel as an accordion. There's different panels here. And the first one by default is expanded. And the difference between this example and the other ones is that, first of all, it's detected that when we first rendering this component that the first panel needs to be expanded. The second thing we notice, there's action buttons here, which when we click on the action, it expands the next expansion panel in the accordion. So that's the difference between this example. And also we don't have our expandable, our toggle icon here. We have our custom icons that we've added, but you could still interact with this just like a typical accordion. So let's go through it. So this particular expansion panel has a title, personal data, has a description, type in your name and age. So let me type in my name. Let me type in my age. Now notice this is an input box. I do have the ability to increment my value. So let's go and click on the next button. This is the on the bottom of this expansion panel. There's an action button, and it's next. So what is happening here is that the initial expansion panel, that is index 0, has been expanded. And now when I click on next, I'm going to point to the next index, which should be expanded, and it's the second one. Okay, so now let's type in our country here, and this expansion panel has a title, destination, a description, type the country name, and notice I have a next button here, but also a previous button here. The color looks different. It's just the worn color of the theme. It's not that something is invalid. Let's just go on to the next action. So I click on the next action, and then the third expansion panel gets expanded, and I could click on the date. Now, this particular date brings up the calendar component. So let's select a date, and now if I go here and I try to edit, this is a read-only field. I cannot edit this. Now I can try to change the date here, which I'm capable of doing. So this is a good way to keep the format of the date the way you want it with the calendar component. So let's click end. Now you may ask yourself, well, wait a minute, where's the state of this data? It's still there. Now, needless to say, these expansion panels, the content is eagerly loaded, and the state is preserved. So at this point in time, I'm asking myself, hey, how do I grab that data and submit it? And we're not going to get into that right now. We'll look at that in the next example. But let's take a look at the code and see what makes this particular program click. I'm going to go look at the code right now. And while that's starting up, I'm just going to land on this root component. Now, as you know, the angular.json file configures the Angular project. It says this is my index, this is my main module, and the main module points to a root component, which is up here. And so when I look at this, it renders. Notice that the step is 0 in the root component. So you know, when the step is 0, it must automatically get expanded. So we'll take a look at that. And notice there's different methods here on this particular object instance. Once it gets created, we have a set step to a value. We have a next step, which increments the step, a previous step, which decreases the value. So notice next makes the step 1. So now this is expanded. and now the next makes the step 2, and now this one is expanded. So let's take a look at what's making that tick in the template code. So notice the selector is here. That's the thing that's in the index.html, and then you have your template code. So let's take a look at the template code. The template code has a matte accordion and is an expansion panel. So let's take a look at the scope of the first expansion panel. Now, the first expansion panel basically says its expanded input attribute into its object is either true or false. If step is identical equals 0, it's true. So I'm going to expand this particular panel when it first renders. So the matte accordion and the matte expansion panels are getting instantiated, and this particular panel says if it's index 0 in my object instance, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand that panel automatically with my input attribute of my matte expansion panel. And then there's also this open, which calls the function set step to 0. So if I come up here and I click this first expansion panel, it's going to set the step to be 0. And this way, when next gets clicked, it goes to the next expansion panel. So notice here I have a hide toggle. So let's take a look at this and just remove this real quick. Now the toggle button does appear. I could toggle this thing and I could see it kind of clearly. Let's just leave that there because the buttons are serving the purpose of navigating through these forms and this expansion in this accordion. So let's just leave it at that. Now notice the expansion panel header is optional, but I have a title which is personal data. Well, the header is not optional. The title and the description is optional. The header is the thing that toggles, right? So you need that. But I could put a personal data here, and I could put a description here, and so let's see if I remove one of these things. It doesn't look so good. If I remove the description, it's not that bad, but I don't like the way the icon shows. So we'll leave it at that. And then the matte icon, which is the account circle, which is this icon here, and notice you basically have these form fields. Now, if there was an ng template here, it would be eagerly loaded. It would be lazy loaded. But since there's no ng template here for the content, then it's eagerly loaded. So just pointing that out. Now, the matte form field has a matte label, first name, input, and then there's a matte form field, which is the age, and there's a matte input type number, minimum 1. So let's see, if I put my age here, and then I started incrementing. Let me see if I put the number 2 here, and yeah, it doesn't go lower than 1. So let's just put my age there, and then we come to this part of the code where there's a matte action row, and the matte action row clicks has an event, an action, which you can click and it goes to the next step, and so when we click, we do go to the next step, which is the next panel, the expansion panel. So let's see. Let me just quickly check here. So here's your next step. All it did was increment the step. Let's take a look at the template. When I clicked on this button and I went to the next step, this thing expanded. So notice notice that since I clicked on this event, the next step increased my step in my step variable in my object instance in my component. And when this when that value changed, it was an input variable to the next expansion panel, where this value step is equal to 1, identically equal to 1, was true. So true went into this expansion panel instance as an input value that got bound to the expanded variable in the panel. So that's why this particular panel got expanded, because my step variable went from 0 to 1, and then that 1, it was identically equal to 1, and so my panel expanded because my expanded was true. And this is the input into my mat expansion panel, which determines whether I'm expanded or not. And once again, I'm hiding the toggle here. If I remove this, the toggle would appear. I put it back. Notice how the whole accordion re-rendered. So let me go back here, and let's continue. Now let's look at the third. Let's look at the third expansion panel. So there's nothing confusing about the second panel. It's pretty much very similar to the same the first panel. The only difference is that there was a previous step there as well as a next step, right? So this when I was here, my step was 0. This step was 1. If step is 1, you expand the panel. This previous button is decreasing it back to 0. This expansion panel says if it's 0, expand, etc. And that was the only difference there. Now this particular previous button looks red because the color is worn as opposed to the primary color. And so it doesn't have anything to do with validation. It's just a point that we're coloring it with the worn color. So now when I click next, I go to the I'm incrementing that step to 2, and this third panel here says, oh, if step is identical equal to 2, then true, I'm expanded, so this thing expands. Once again, I have the hide toggle button, and in the event that I go here and then click on this third expansion panel, then it's going to be opened, and I'm going to be setting my step equal to 2. This way my previous button works here. Okay, now what else is here? Okay, so we have the day of the trip. We have the description, inform the date you wish to travel. There's a date range icon here. And then what we do is we need a form field that says date, and the input field is bound to a mat date picker, and this picker value is referenced in this particular component, the mat date picker. This is a name with this hash symbol. It says this is the name of this component. So this picker opens up. When I click on this thing, it opens up the picker because the focus is there. It opens up the picker, and it's read-only, so I can't edit it. And then what I could do is I could choose, and at that point the value of the date field input field is chosen. So very nice code, very clean code. very user-friendly code, and also it's less prone to errors and users typing out their particular component values. So now we just go to end, and once again there's a previous button, there's an end button, etc. So that was all I wanted to show you with the example. Like I said, no rocket science here. All I'm doing is I'm looking at the documentation, looking at the example, and asking myself why, what, how do I use this, how do I expand this, what do I like about it, what do I don't like about it. So now the thing I'm left with is, this was really nice. My data is here. But now I need to grab the data and do something with it. And so after reading through all this documentation, I was left with that question in mind. How do you really do forms here? How does this compare to the stepper widget? When should I use it? I know one thing about the stepper that I really like is the fact that you got these forms, and you got control of the data, validation rules, all this other stuff built right into it. Not built right into it, but very easily extendable. The stepper is very, very robust, and for large scale things. This, though, I really like this small component expansion panel to grab data really fast. So we'll look at how to use forms, how to validate, how to grab the data, how to call a web service from this particular component when we start building some custom examples using the expansion panel. So that's all I want to talk about with this particular component, and let's move on to more analysis.